Thinking about getting married, but what if things don't work out? I mean, we all know someone who is married or has been divorced before, but how does the law play into this? Here is Sandra. Sandra has been dating Gavin for 8 months, and she thinks he is major marriage material. But what is marriage anyhow? Marriage is a legal union of a man and a woman as husband and wife. In most states, the legal age of marriage without parental permission is 18. Since Sandra is 24 years old, she does not need her parents' permission. But lucky for Sandra, her parents have taken a liking to Gavin. Sandra and Gavin decided to live together until the wedding. This living arrangement is called cohabitation. Up until the 1970s, unmarried couples living together was illegal in the United States. If Gavin and Sandra never end up getting married but continue to live together for more than 10 years, they are considered to be married in common law. But anyway, back to the proposal. So, when Sandra accepted Gavin's proposal and engagement ring, it became legally enforceable contract. If one of the parties back out of the engagement, a breach of contract occurs. In order to get married, Sandra and Gavin, like any other couple looking to get married, need to follow the laws of the state in which they wish to marry. An alternative to getting married is entering a civil union. A civil union typically offers many of the rights, duties, and benefits as a marriage to those who choose it. Many same-sex couples choose to do this in some states if it is legal. Before Sandra and Gavin get married, they created a prenup. Some couples before heading to the altar get what is called a prenuptial agreement. A prenup is when a spouse brings property into a marriage that they want to keep in their own names, and they do not want their spouse to claim it in an event of death or divorce, so they make a prenup. Sandra wants to be able to put a claim on her grandmother's diamond pin just in case things go sour with Gavin. The law sees a marriage contract as a contract for life and for husband and wife to benefit each other. Purposes like raising children, economic, and companionship needs are included. This is known as marital consortium. But that has not stopped people from ending their marriages. Sometimes things just don't work out and the marriage has failed. There are many ways to end a marriage. One way to end a marriage is called a divorce. A divorce is a court action that ends the marriage between husband and wife and divides shared property and responsibility between the two parties. Divorces are hugely common in society today. According to a study and a report from Utah State University, 40 to 50% of all marriages and 60% of all second marriages will end in divorce. In some states, the first step towards divorce is separation, which means that the spouses are not living together, but their marital rights and obligations remain intact. Their rights and obligations remain there until the divorce settlement is final and the courts have officially divided their assets and assigned them their part of the marital estate. Sandra's biggest fear about getting married is that her relationship will end in a divorce from Gavin. It seems like no one can stay together these days anymore. There is also a thing called an annulment. An annulment is a legal procedure for declaring that avoidable marriage is null and void. But what even is qualified as avoidable marriage? A voidable marriage is one that results from a problem that existed from the beginning of the supposed union. Types of problems like lying to a spouse on things like wealth, conditions of pregnancy, freedom of disease, past marriage, age, and etc. What is the difference between a voidable marriage and a void marriage? Well, a void marriage creates no rights or duties for either party and is considered invalid from the beginning. This didn't really happen, but let's say for an example. Gavin was already married to a woman named Carrie for a few years, but they decided to get divorced. Secretly, Gavin got into the relationship with Sandra. Through the whole ordeal, neither Sandra nor Carrie knew of one another. When Sandra and Gavin ended up getting married, Gavin was still legally married to his first wife, Carrie. Since a divorce was not obtained and the problems existed from the beginning of the supposed union, the marriage between Sandra and Gavin would be void. A void marriage is automatically without effect. In this situation, Gavin would also be considered a bigamist, one who commits the crime of knowingly marrying a second person while still being married to the first. There are also such things called no-fault divorces. This is when the spouse that is requesting a divorce does not have to list a grievance, such as adultery, desertion, or cruelty against each other. Instead, the court recognizes that the right of either spouse to terminate the marriage and both spouses of the marriage agree on it. In other words, they both simply just want out of the marriage and don't necessarily have to claim anything against each other. Let's go back to our same couple, Sandra and Gavin. In this case, he was always married to Sandra, and there was never anyone else in the picture. Perhaps they got married, and they were very young. Maybe they were both 18, and they had lived together for 20 years. As the years went by, they felt themselves growing apart from one another and no longer having the relationship they once had. At 40 years old, both Sandra and Gavin feel distant and each realize that they are both still young and want to move on with their lives and have new experiences. In this case, neither Sandra nor Gavin did anything to warrant a divorce with the other, simply believed that the best choice for them would be to terminate their marriage. In this case, the no-fault divorce would be applicable. The most legal reason for no-fault divorce is that the partners have irreconcilable differences, and the mutual best thing would be is to split up. The divorce procedure can be quite a long and arduous process depending on how well both the man and woman comply with the courts and with the extensive paperwork and orders that are involved in the divorce. As we said before, some states say that the first step of divorce procedure is separation of the man and woman into separate living quarters, although technically they are still married until the courts finalize the documents and rule on the details, such as the amount of money each side gets and other details such as child custody. Parties can get a legal separation agreement if they choose, containing terms related to child custody, child support, alimony, and property division, which can be the foundation for the final divorce agreement. Additionally, marital counseling is another step of the process of divorce. This is to ensure that the conflicts between the couple are legitimately irreparable and they cannot work out their differences. Once again, our couple, Sandra and Gavin, are back. This time they have been married for 5 years. Both have been, for the most part, amicable, honest, and loving to each other before and during their marriage, and had been generally happy. They have also adopted a 3-year-old daughter, Lucy, from Kenya. Adoption is when a child is given up from the birth parents and the roles of the mother and father are legally assumed by other individuals. But back to the story. In the 6th year of Sandra and Gavin's marriage, Gavin had found evidence that Sandra had been cheating on him with his co-worker for 9 months and has been giving him money from their shared accounts when Gavin works full-time and Sandra stays at home. In addition to being unfaithful and stealing money, Sandra has also been very critical and cruel to Gavin's side of the family, which he feels very uncomfortable with. He decides to file for divorce from Sandra. To begin the process, Gavin moved all of his things into the basement of the house to separate from Sandra, as felt he could not physically leave because his daughter Lucy was in the home, and if he left, he could risk losing custody of her. Sandra and Gavin tried to attend counseling sessions, but Sandra could not admit that her extramarital relationship with her co-worker was wrong, and Gavin could not forgive her for hurting him so much. This firmly demonstrated the need for a divorce. As a result, Sandra and Gavin continued in the divorce process. They both hired lawyers and began to go to court to resolve the critical issues that remained. These issues include the division of their property, child custody, and support of their daughter Lucy. Child custody involves who is concerned with the physical and other responsibilities of the child from divorced or separated parents. On the other hand, child support is monetary payment to provide for a dependent child with appropriate economic maintenance. The job of their lawyers is to accumulate documentation and facts to support their client and help them get the stable life after the following divorce. When the judge looks to divide property, they consider issues such as the conduct of the parties during the marriage, age, and earning power of each spouse, length of marriage, and contributions of each spouse to the marriage. Because Sandra stayed at home with their daughter Lucy, that also would be taken into consideration when custody is decided. Well, that's all. Thank you for listening.